Hi, this is Steve Michelotti from Applied Information Sciences. Welcome to a brief demonstration of the AIS Service Catalog. Before I begin the demo of the Service Catalog, I want to first take a couple of minutes for some important background context. First, it's important to understand what is the AIS Service Catalog. The Service Catalog is an ITIL-style catalog for cloud deployments that lets you roll out IT services in a consistent, controlled manner. You will hear me refer to the IT services as products. A product could be anything from a single virtual machine, or a single product could be a collection of resources that make up a multi-tier application, such as a website, a database, and a cache. The Service Catalog is based on a paradigm where your users can come in and discover these products and then deploy them in a self-service fashion without having highly privileged access. Now that we understand what AIS Service Catalog is, let's look at why we would want to use it. The Service Catalog offers centralized management for enterprise standards and product definitions. This enables an enterprise to enforce policies such as data center locations, VM sizes, database SKUs, and more. This leads to better manageability and simpler compliance with enterprise standards. AIS Service Catalog enables simple self-service provisioning and ease of use, where your users can discover resources and easily deploy them in seconds, without having to weed through all the complexities of the numerous configuration options of resources. Since AIS Service Catalog is offered as a software as a service, there is an extremely low total cost of ownership. There's no maintenance, and you get updates automatically as new features are rolled out. You also quickly get access to new resources that are rolled out by the cloud providers such as Azure. Another important point here is that once resources are provisioned, they look like any other provisioned resource. This means that you could decide to stop using the AIS Service Catalog at any time, and all the resources that you previously provisioned in the cloud would still be available to you and can still be managed in the respective cloud portal, just like any other resource. The AIS Service Catalog represents a wealth of experience and knowledge that we've accumulated over the years working with numerous large enterprises, both commercial and federal. We often see pockets of automation where portions of a DevOps process are automated and others are not. This results in what is known as script sprawl. The goal of the Service Catalog is to enable automation of all DevOps procedures and improve consistency. Now that we've seen what the AIS Service Catalog is and why we would want to use it, let's look at how we can use it. The first step is to connect your tenant to the AIS Service Catalog through our streamlined enrollment process. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to skip the demonstration of the enrollment process so that we can get to the actual usage of the tool. We have a separate video that shows the enrollment process. Once enrolled, it's time for a Product Catalog Designer to start maintaining what is available in the Product Catalog. Let's look at that now. Here I am in the Manage Product Catalog screen of the Service Catalog, and you can see that it's already pre-populated with a few products. We have products here for an Azure storage account, virtual machines, web applications, and so forth. Let's add a new product now. Up here we have the Add New Product button, and when I click it, you can see we have 4 options for adding a new product. Let's select this first option, which is that we can add a new product with our drag and drop designer. What I'm going to do is come in here and just give it a name. We'll call it Web App 1, and we can optionally give it a product price. I'm just going to leave that blank for now. And then the description will be a basic Azure web app. Now, if I scroll down, you can see that we have a designer area and I can drag resources on. Here I'm dragging a web app, a SQL database, a Redis cache, and I could stop there and say, these 3 resources are how I'm going to define this individual product. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to keep it simpler, so I'm going to clear all those out and just drag a web app out, so my deployment will go a little faster when we get to that point. The other thing you're going to see is that I have this checkbox for is published, because I might be working on a product, but I'm not ready to publish it to the catalog yet, so I'd leave that unchecked. For now, I'm going to go ahead and check it. Another thing we can do is we can add an optional image. So I can say add image here. I can select a file, and let's just add this file right here for a website and click OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and save. So I'm going to go back to the Manage Product Catalog screen, and you can see right here the Web App 1 that we just created. Now, the important thing to remember is that when it comes to Azure deployments, everything we're doing here is based on ARM, Azure Resource Manager. And so when we did that drag drop operation, All that's really happening is behind the scenes, we're creating that ARM JSON template for you. I'm going to click on the web app 1 that we just created right here. And sure enough, right here, you can see all the JSON that was just generated on our behalf. We could do this all by hand if we want. Certainly any valid ARM template is perfectly valid. But in this case, the drag drop certainly helped to jumpstart us very quickly. And you can see we have certain parameters here like site name, hosting plan name, and SKU, as well as worker size. And this is totally customizable. So for example, in the SKU, let's say I did not want to give the users the option to deploy to a shared environment. I could just take this out completely. Now they still have their choice, but I'm constraining what their choice is going to be to free, basic, or standard. We also have variables and resources. If we look at the resources, you can see that 2 resources were created. The first one is our basic hosting plan. And then right here, we have the resource for the website itself. Let's go ahead and save that. Another thing we can do is we can actually download that JSON file that we've just been creating. And there it is right down there, webapp1.json. I'm going to click back to the Manage Product Catalog view. And let's open another JSON template that's a little bit more complex. Here we have a web app plus SQL and Redis. I'm going to click that. And right off the bat, you can see we have many more parameters than we did. Here's parameters related to database and Redis. Let's collapse that. Another thing you're going to see is that for the resources, here we have our hosting plan, just like before. And now we also have a website similar to before. And now we have a third resource that's an actual SQL server. And this resource has nested resources. The first nested resource is the database itself. And the second nested resource is for firewall rules. And then finally, we have another resource at the bottom, and this resource is for the Redis cache itself. Now, the other way we can add a new product is with the JSON editor. To expedite this, I'm going to go into web app 1 that I just created, and I'm going to select all and copy it. And now I'm going to come back to add new product and just say add with JSON editor. And I'm just going to paste it all right in here. Let's call it web app 2. Basic web app 2. And I'm going to leave the is published checkbox unchecked. And I'm going to save it. So that just goes to show you how easy it is. You don't have to use a drag drop designer. You are in complete control of the JSON, and any valid ARM template you can put right in there. Now let's go back and look at the third way we have to add a new product. You see this third option says import from quick starts. Let's bring that up. And what's happening here is it's actually retrieving the quick starts from the GitHub repository that is the home of many Azure Resource Manager quick start templates. This is one of the de facto locations for good practices with Azure Resource templates. And I can search here. For example, if I'm looking for templates with MySQL, I can just type right in here and I can see some MySQL templates. Or I could see Mongo templates. Right here, I've searched for AIS and I see a template here, AIS 2 virtual machines and SQL 1 virtual machine. So let's select that one and I'm going to import the template. And let's just come in here and let's give it a price of 11. And let's say the description is 2 AIS VMs and 1 SQL VM. And let's set is published equal to true, and we'll go ahead and save it. The other thing we'll see is we have a fourth option, import product from file. So if you remember, we exported the webapp1.json. Any JSON file that contains an Azure Resource Manager template will do, and that can just import directly into the product catalog as well. At this point, you've gotten a solid introduction of the various ways we can manage the product catalog, particularly with how we can add new products to the product catalog. You've just seen the create product definition process, where we could manage our product catalog and we saw various ways to add new products. Now that we've defined items in our product catalog, the final step is for a user to consume and deploy products in the catalog. Let's show that now. Here I have the home screen that a typical user would see, and this home screen is our product catalog. You can see this is not just a simple list that an admin would see when they're managing it. This is a more user-friendly view. And you can see the web app 1 down here that we previously created with drag drop. We see the IIS2 VM, SQL1 VM that we imported from the quick start. Also notice you do not see web app 2 because I did not check the box for that to be published. Also, here's the web app with SQL and Redis. We looked at that one in the JSON editor as well. Let's have a look at the web app 1. And when I click that, this brings us to the product details screen just for that product. And you can see the parameters right here for site name, hosting plan name, SKU, and worker size. And these are exactly the parameters that we saw in the JSON. And then we had 2 resources. Here's the app service plan itself and the web app. Now this gives a much more user-friendly view than looking at raw JSON, but if for any reason we did want to see that, we could click this button here that says show details, and we could see the raw section of the ARM template just for that resource. Let's go look at an example that's a little bit more complex. Let's click on this one right here for web app plus SQL and Redis. You can see we have a lot more parameters. We also have more resources here. And if we look at the SQL Server resource, we can see there's a 2 right here that shows this as 2 child resources. And sure enough, here's the SQL database that we saw earlier in the JSON. And here are the firewall rules. So this just gives a nice view of how many resources you have and how the resources are nested. Similarly, here's the IIS2 VM, SQL1 VM that we imported from the product catalog, and you can see this has lots of resources, and we could explore this to our heart's content. Now let's go back and actually do a deploy. I'll click on the web app 1 that we previously created, and now I'm just going to click this Deploy Now button. And the first thing it's going to ask me to do is ask for a subscription. I'm going to select the dev subscription. I have a couple subscriptions attached to this tenant. And the resource groups, I don't have any resource groups in here currently. So I'm going to add a new resource group. And I'm going to call this resource group AIS Service Catalog Steve Test. And we're going to put this in the East US region. So that's just done is it's actually created a resource group for me in Azure. Now let's put in a site name. We'll just call it ASC for AIS Service Catalog Test Web App 1. Hosting plan name, we'll just say it's free. Now, when we look at the SKU, if we look at the drop-down list here, you'll see we have free, basic, and standard. We do not see shared as an option because if you recall earlier, I eliminated the shared option from the JSON template. That's just a way to show how we're in complete control of the options the user has available to them. In fact, I may have said they don't have the option to select the SKU at all. It's always going to be this one specific SKU. So I can either give them a choice, not give them the choice, or I can give them the choice, but constrain the choices that they have available. I'll just leave the worker size as the default. Now, before I actually deploy this, let me go over here and flip over to my Azure portal just to show that I have no web apps currently deployed. I'm going to hit the refresh here. You can see no web apps are deployed. If I click over to resource groups, you will see the resource group that I just created, AIS Service Catalog Steve Test. But again, app services, we have no app services currently deployed. So I'm going to come back here and we're going to click the deploy button. Now at this point, you see the deployment's running, the status is running, and we have an indication that work is being done. This is deploying an empty website, so this should complete relatively quickly. And it is now complete. So let's flip back over to the portal one more time. And now when we refresh this, we can see we've just deployed that web app, and here it is right here. Now there's one other thing I want to show. If I flip back here, let's go back to the catalog, and let's select this one right here, Azure Web App with Code. At first glance, it looks almost identical to Web App 1 that we just deployed, just a couple of differences. I'm going to click Deploy Now. I'm going to again select the dev subscription. And instead of creating a new resource group, I'm just going to use the resource group that I already had created in the previous one. Now the site name for this one is ASC Test Web App with Code. And hosting plan name, again, I'll give it as free. Now a couple of differences here. First, we don't see a SKU or a worker size. So I just did that as an example to see that we don't have to give every option. We can control which options we give for which templates. The other thing we're going to see here is we have this new option called Package URI, which is the location of a web deployment package that should be deployed after provisioning. And if we look at this whole URL, you can see it's a zip file. So the way this got here is we have an automated build server, and when the build completes, it publishes the web deployment zip file to Azure blob storage. This allows us to incorporate this and automatically deploy that app. So let's go ahead and click the deploy button for this one. This one will also be relatively quick. It might take a few seconds longer because we're actually deploying code. While that's working, let's flip over to the portal one more time. This is the ASC Test Web App 1 that we previously created. And you can see we already have a provisioned URL. And if I go ahead and click that, we're going to see that this comes up with the default blue page that Azure gives you anytime you create an empty web app, just to say that the web app has been successfully created. There's nothing there though. Now, if we flip back up, and already the deployment for the second one is now done, we can see that's now succeeded. And so if we go back to the portal and let's refresh our app services here, now we can see that there's the second site, ACS Test Web App with Code. So let's click that one. And this time, let's click on this URL. Now this time, instead of just getting the default blue page saying the web app had been created, we have a full ASP.NET MVC app that has been provisioned and deployed to this website. Now this is not much more than file new project just for demonstration purposes, but you see that it was automatically built by our build server, provisioned and deployed by the AIS Service Catalog. One other demonstration I want to show is the resource groups right here. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And we have a couple of different options here. In my dev subscription, we can see the resource group that I just deployed. Now I'm not going to click this because those resources are brand new. They haven't had any traffic. They haven't been deployed for much time. So it's not going to show us data that's very meaningful at all. So let me flip to another subscription here. And I'm going to click on this resource group that's Michelati blog so that we get a little bit more real world data. Now what just happened here is we actually went out and made a real-time call to the Azure Billing API so we could get some spend information. So we can see we have a couple of resources that are available in this resource group, and then we can mouse hover over this graph to see the spend of the last 30 days. These are some of the primary features of the AIS Service Catalog. Because the Azure deployments are based in the Azure Resource Manager, the sky is really the limit in terms of the flexibility that an organization has to customize the automation of their DevOps process.